And hello and welcome to yet another edition of Hello America's What's Cooking. Today we're an hour early and it's a special edition because we are celebrating Global Meetings Industry Day. My name is Xenia Paul. I'm the Regional Director for ECA North America. And our audience is in for a treat because the guests we have lined up today are all champions for our events industry, but also for the association industry. So please be ready to ask your questions and share your comments in the chat. And without further ado, I would like to ask my guests to just quickly introduce themselves. Stephanie, over to you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Stephanie Jones. I am the Managing Director of Professional Development and Event Strategy with the Water Environment Federation. And it's nice to be here with you today, Cynthia.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Over to you, Beth.
Hey everyone, I'm Beth Sermont. I work for 360 Live Media, leading experience design, event design, and strategy, and I'm pumped for our conversation today.
Super exciting. And Mariella.
Hello, I'm Mariella McElraith. I'm Vice President of Sustainability and Industry Advancement with the Events Industry Council, and so excited to be here. And what a great way to celebrate Global Meetings Industry and World Health Day with all of you.
Thank you so much, and I was just glad I didn't have to pronounce your last name. So thank you for that. So we've already announced it's Global Meetings Industry Day. Although when we were promoting our session, we were going to talk really very much about diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility for our meetings for both delegates as well as the workforce. However, just let's put that first into perspective. We do have to acknowledge Global Meetings Industry Day, and face-to-face meetings are important for us. Stephanie, why are meetings important for your association? I know when we chatted, you had quite a few factors to mention.
Yeah, so for my association, we're a 501c3 association, nonprofit. We have individual members, but we also have members that manufacture the equipment that is used in the industry. So for us, especially post-COVID, we've seen that it's very important that we bring that community together so they can have those connections, so that we can help create an impact on the industry that we represent, and also to help build a stronger, more meaningful business relationships between our partners and our members. Additionally, as most nonprofit associations see, our face-to-face meetings are major revenue drivers for the association. They generate the revenue that helps us launch and maintain those mission-related or mission-driven programs and initiatives that really don't generate revenue. So they are critical to the financial, viability of associations. So we're looking at, financial drivers, creating and building community, and of course, impacting the industry that we represent.
And I want to hop on that impact question straight away and move over to you, Mariella. Mm-hmm. All your stakeholders of the EIC, for them, the importance of meetings is just existential. But tell us a little bit more about some of the new developments you're putting into action and the catalytic effects of meetings and their value.
Absolutely. Well, we know absolutely, with certainty that meetings matter. We know that we have a tremendous impact on the communities that we serve and on the destinations where we meet. So our last economic significance study was measured 2017 levels, and from that we had some really powerful statistics. We know that we support 10 million direct jobs, 26 million jobs in total, that we create over $1 trillion in GDP, and that we reach 1.5 billion people per year. And that is a tremendous impact. But that's only part of the story, right? What we're doing right now is we are sending out our economic significance study survey again, and we're going to be looking at collecting data from 2019 as the high water mark, so before COVID, as well as looking to the future. What are we forecasting in the future? And we are, for the first time, going to start to include questions around the catalytic impact of events. So we know that when people come together, there's innovation that happens. There are business relationships that are developed. There is, an impact that goes far beyond, the direct jobs and the economic impact on the destinations. That is fundamental, but it's not the full story. So I'm really going to encourage everyone here to share your story of how meetings matter. Really want to have the association voice represented because of the important work that associations do. So I encourage everyone to look out for that survey link coming your way, probably in the next 24 hours, and complete that and help share your story.
And I would like to immediately jump on that and again highlight for both associations as well as destinations. The DEIA Incredible Impacts Award Program awards those associations and their meetings who have achieved long-lasting impacts and awards $7,500. 3 associations every year. You can find more information on how to enter or how to nominate somebody on our website, icaworld.org/incredible impacts. And funnily enough, last year's all 3 winners were in the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that social aspect has really pushed forward through the pandemic and became much more important. When we first launched the program, we had a lot of medical associations demonstrating long-term impact, and somehow everybody was saying, oh yes, we can't do what the medical associations could. But as the pandemic progressed, the social impact became very, very apparent. And I've already now made an intro to what we will be talking, and I'm going to move on to Beth. This year's theme for GMID is Meet Safe, but Meet Safe isn't just about physical safety and health regulations, right, Beth? I'm sure there is also something connected to DEI.
Absolutely. I think Meet Safe is a perfect theme for this year because we're coming back in person. And of course, COVID and weather crisis and harassment, like there's always been all kinds of ways we physically need to keep our attendees safe. But psychologically, it's important to keep people safe as well. And that's where DEI and A really come in. We use A sometimes to refer to access. And so if you think about accessibility to start with, right? I need to know, or a person who has different needs needs to know that coming to an event, I'm going to be able to fully participate. It's going to be easy for me to get to the buffet line. I'm going to be able to hear or understand all of the sessions, even not the ones in the main room, right? That there's captioning or ASL provided or the equivalent. And so, it's really important to ensure that psychological safety. And of course, that takes other formats. As a lesbian and someone who presents a little bit more masculine, I have heightened sensitivity to the 238 bills that have been introduced just this year across the US. That's almost double last year, that are all anti-LGBTQ. Now, a lot of those are just sort of political theater, but there are some states that are scarier than others because the governors are using these as a political platform to advance their own interests. And it's not just LGBT. We're talking about women's rights. We're talking about the disenfranchisement of Black voters. We're talking about anywhere that there's a case that is going to have an impact on Black Lives Matter. There is a lot that's happening, and it gets picked up in the press. And 2 things happen then. Right? So 1, your attendees who are impacted by whatever that issue is, now they have hesitation. They don't know if they want to travel or spend money in that state. And 2, you might have your members calling on you to make a change to the venue for your meeting. One of the services that we offer is crisis communications. And I can tell you there's been a huge uptick in members contacting their organizations, telling them to cancel their meeting or move their meeting. And, that's not always an option for us because of cost or resources. So, there's a lot of strategies surrounding how to manage that and how to make people feel safe. I don't want to take up any more time here, but if later on people want to dive into that a little more deeply, I'm happy to do that.
And thank you. This is so important to highlight the impact of DEIA on all aspects of the event, which can really evolve and turn into a crisis if we are not mindful of all the issues ahead of time. And I want to go more into the DEIA issues. And before we go into our specific questions, and please, audience, feel free to ask questions along the line. And I know I haven't acknowledged you all, so sorry for that. Thank you, Steve, for being here, and Peter as well. And thank you, Santo, to join us after your session with GMID Mexico. That's really great. The EIC did a survey, which ICA supported, ASA supported as well. And I know you had a session with some preliminary results during the National Business Events Week just two weeks ago. But could you also share a couple of key findings with us, Mariela, please?
Absolutely. Well, we put together our equity acceleration plan and have brought together an incredible group of thought leaders forming our equity task force. And they first started off with creating a framework. So we identified some specific areas of focus, including ownership, accountability and power of influence, delivering change, and sustaining change. So those are the areas that we want to measure in terms of the people's sentiment towards these areas. And our plan is to use the data that was collected through the survey to develop tools and resources according to specific pathways. So we're going to look at helping organizations develop internal guidelines, as well as look at pathways for leadership, career pathways, and event toolkits specifically. So in terms of some of the things that we heard and we found, in some ways it wasn't news that was surprising to us of what we heard, but it is nice to be able to have the data to reinforce what we already knew to be true. So some of the key findings that we had were that respondents who identify as Black rated the DEI experience 11% lower across the dimensions that I mentioned earlier. And also in three of four dimensions, men consistently rated their experiences higher than their female colleagues. So those are just a couple of the findings that we had. There's quite a bit that we measured as well that isn't included in here that will be included as the final report. So we were measuring according to not only ethnicity and gender, but also looking at gender identity, gender expression. We looked at accessibility as well, so looking at the experiences, and also being able to filter as a secondary lens ethnicity by global region. So we'll have some information to share around experiences that may be different depending on where you're based in the world. So those are some of the preliminary things that we found.
Thank you so much, Mariela. And I know, Beth, what you were saying pretty much resonated also with our audience, and really thanking you for bringing some of those factors onto the table, so to speak. And from your findings, Mariela, we are moving on, because I forgot to mention at the beginning that I am, together with Stephanie and Beth, sitting on the Meetings and Exposition Council of ASE, and together we are in the working group of DEIA, and we've been collaborating with the EIC on that topic as well. So that is putting everything into perspective, and this is also the reason why we are leading this conversation. So I'm moving over to Stephanie, who's the incoming chair of our council, and would like to ask you to talk a little bit more now, knowing what we have from those findings, which are just confirming what we already know. Let's talk about that conscious inclusion, which is also very high on the agenda for ASAE. And how will this affect RFPs, for instance? Why should suppliers even look at that? And how does that transcend just that association space? Oh, you are muted.
That's the story of my life. I'm always muted. Maybe that means something. But anyway, so let's break down conscious inclusion first. We've all participated in training on unconscious bias and how we need to be aware of our biases. But I think the fact is that being aware of your unconscious bias on its own is really not enough. We need to move towards having a mindset of cultivating conscious inclusion. So, what that really means is that we need to consciously change our behaviors to be more inclusive. It needs to be something that is done intentionally, all of the time. So, there's ways that we can do that. And as event organizers and trade show organizers, three things that Mariella mentioned kind of resonated with me. And that was ownership, accountability, and power of influence. We have all of those three things. In fact, we have a lot of influence. And I think we can influence our partners, the venues that we work with, the suppliers that we work with, to embrace this strategy of conscious inclusion. And as you mentioned, that could be part of what we include in our RFP process. Don't really have all of the details worked out yet. That's what the M&E Council is working on. But some examples could be, you may want to ask your venue or the supplier if they have a DE&I policy, to share that. Ask if they're setting KPIs and measuring their success. We want to see the intentionality of it. We just don't want to hear you talking about it. We want to hear you set goals, and the organization as well, and then measure the success. How are you doing? We can also consciously request that our team that services our account be diverse. We should have some influence over that. So I guess in a quick nutshell, that's what conscious inclusion is. That's the strategy that ASAE is advocating now at the moment. And looking forward to working out how that really plays out in the business events, with business event strategists, and in the meetings industry.
And basically, that's a call to action to just go from purely talking and starting to do things and be intentional about it. And that brings me straight to Beth. You've been working with a lot of associations, and especially in their designing their events, including intentionally the DEI and A lens. Are there any best practices you could share?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it starts with what Stephanie was saying, measure it. What gets measured gets done, right? And so you have to start out with not just saying, oh, we're going to have, a diverse slate of speakers. You have to set actual goals around the percentages of your speakers that are not going to be just one voice that you've always had in the past. Along with that, I think, is leveraging the RFP, as Stephanie was saying, and I'll look at it from the planner side. For a long time, we've used our RFPs to get all the information we need about our events, right? We need to know about, room nights and space and all of that. So adding DEI questions into that just gives you another piece of information to help you make those decisions. It doesn't mean that it's the only thing that you're going to base your decisions on, but it's something that you can weigh in along with sustainability best practices, for example, as you're considering the venues that you bring forward to be chosen. Another way I think that planners can make impact, and some have more control here than others, but it's in your steering and planning committees that are putting on and putting together the content for your events. A lot of times these committees, we have legacy structures in place that mean that, only people with a certain level of experience get to serve on them. And, because of systematic barriers, what happens is the space we're in right now, for some groups, it's really hard to build that layer and that level of experience. And so the time to start is now with saying, hey, let's include a few new voices in this planning committee. Maybe we want to put a younger professional on the committee. Maybe we want to make sure that, the percentages of people who are making up our content reflect the percentages of the general population or reflect the percentages of our membership. It's not going to be an easy conversation. It never is. But a great way to get started is by either finding a champion on the volunteer side to help you with that. There's a lot of people talking about this now, or just paying attention and listening to the signal. And when somebody comes up and says, hey, you know what? Maybe we do need a few more people in this group. Use that as your opportunity to say, yes, you know what? As a starting point, let's make sure that the committee percentage reflects the percentage of membership. It's just one small step, but it's a way to get started that can be really helpful.
And we, as the M&E Council, have been working on an article with some top tips, right?
That is correct. We have an article with top tips. The published date is coming soon, but we've got 10 tips plus a bonus 11th because we always go overboard.
And so please look out for those if you have not started yet. And if you have started, please feel free to share some links or some tips in the chat. So we make this a two-way conversation. And also, if you do want to stay connected with the people here in the room, please feel free to drop your name in the chat, and we will be reaching out and including you in those conversations. When you did your introduction, Mariela, you mentioned another celebratory day, which is the World Health Day. So
Absolutely.
I just wanted to jump in on that one and see how does health factors in accessibility and in meetings in future?
Well, I think that's, certainly we've seen in the last 2 years how important health issues are in affecting our events. And we really need to be thinking this very thoughtfully. This year's theme for World Health Day is actually aligning to climate as well. So really being thoughtful about the impact that we have in terms of creating carbon emissions, making sure that we're really thoughtful about the design of our events to manage that. And in respect to accessibility, I really like the approach of thinking about universal design. So rather than, after the fact, asking people what they need and making accommodations, why not plan for it from the beginning? Why not advertise that, share that? What we want to do is to have everyone feel a sense of welcoming, of belonging, and a sense of dignity and participation in our events and in our workforce. So if rather than saying, after the fact, what do you need? Starting off by saying, this is what we are providing already. Please reach out to us if you need additional, anything. It shows that that conscious inclusion that Stephanie was talking about, really being, from the beginning of the design for both in-person and digital events as well. So thinking about how are you going to make your digital events inclusive. I think it's important to recognize that many people who have accessibility needs may have underlying health conditions as well that may make them a little bit more, they may be a little bit more reluctant or may have reservations about attending in-person events. So doing everything we can to make sure that the digital experiences are also inclusive is going to be very important. And sharing that in the same approach of that universal design, sharing what we're doing in terms of accessibility for our events can be really, really valuable and beneficial. So there's a few thoughts, and certainly I could go on in terms of the climate aspects as well, but I'll try to limit my comments around accessibility.
And I think the overarching theme, if we want to really approach our events through the DEI and A lens, is the being intentional about everything. Exactly. And make it measurable from the outset. And being really welcoming, and sometimes I think isn't that the part of events? Shouldn't they be welcoming anyway? But unfortunately, we are having those discussions, and that leads me to my last question. Unless somebody in the audience still has some questions, and let's talk about obstacles. What are some of the obstacles we need to overcome when we talk about DEIA practices? Because identifying those obstacles can help us find solutions and be more intentional, be more inclusive. Beth, over to you.
Yeah, that's a hard question to answer because there are so many, I think. But I'll give a few and try not to steal answers from my fellow panelists here. But obviously, cost and resources, right? We all know that we're expected to do less with fewer people right now, and so it can feel like having to think about this stuff, especially if it's not already part of our process. It's just like, oh, I'm just trying to get my event going. Like, how can I even focus on this? So that's definitely an obstacle. I think too, another one, and I sort of referenced it a little bit before, is, there's some things out of our control, like, the systematic oppression that has created barriers across many industries for years and years and years. There is a reason why the people at the top of most professions look a certain way. And so, we don't have full control to be able to go backwards in time and change that. But what we can do is put things in place now to start to change it going forward. In the next 20 years, hopefully, this isn't going to be the same type of problem that it is today. But that's why it's something I think particularly associations need to pay attention to, because those people who are coming up in the workforce now, who are the experts that are coming in, they're not going to come to the organizations where they don't see themselves reflected. So it's really important to be doing that extra work and doing that extra digging to find the different and diverse voices to have on your stage. And I'll give you just, a quick tip to not talk too long. But, when I've had to do this in the past, one of the things I've done is actually go to those experts that are well known and ask them to refer me to speakers that maybe people haven't heard from as much in the past. And I have a 100% success rate with doing that. They are always willing to amplify and champion someone else in the field. So it sounds difficult. It is an extra step, but it's certainly within reach for any planner.
And one thing which really resonated with me now when you were saying it, there's a whole new workforce coming in, a whole new group of delegates who have expectations. So if we want to remain relevant, we cannot afford not to.
Correct.
So over to you, Stephanie.
Well, I think Beth touched on a couple of barriers that I see. Managing this change with our legacy committees, our legacy members who are right now sitting in that leadership role is a huge barrier. You need a champion, whether it's your executive director or your board. They need to really be invested in what we're doing here. So from my perspective, that is the big barrier. We can set our goals, we can set KPIs, we can write speaker policy, we can do all of that. But if we don't have buy-in from leadership, there's really not much we can do with it, because there's always going to be the squeaky wheel that's going to reach out and complain or ask, well, why are you doing this? It's been going fine. Why are we changing? And managing that change and expectations, I think, for me particularly, is a huge barrier.
And I think this answers a little bit the question as well, but maybe Beth or Stephanie, maybe you do have some additional tips besides the champion and being recommended via some of those experts.
Yeah. Stephanie, did you want to take the first pass, or did you want me to?
You can go ahead, Beth.
Yeah, sure.
I'll play off of what you said, probably.
Perfect. So, one of the things that we recommend is to introduce a compelling question to your event. Now, that question can be around, just about anything. We tend to look towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals, but that provides a centering opportunity that allows different voices and different types of experts to come into the event. I'll use a quick example just to bring it to life a little bit. We worked with an organization who deals with food and flavors and food technology. They decided to introduce into their event the idea of, could we ever achieve zero hunger? And so what that ended up doing was opening them up to NGO speakers and entrepreneur speakers and other types of people like that. So nearly every organization that's mission driven has somewhere in their mission the ability to introduce a world impact, back to what you were saying before, and Mariella at the beginning, and Stephanie, a way to impact the world. And opening the aperture just a little bit can create that space. Stephanie.
Okay, I totally forgot what the question
Oh,
was.
I'm so sorry.
How to introduce more diversity in speakers.
Got you. So I think that from my perspective, staff has the responsibility to kind of drive that change, right? So we are taking that on ourselves, trying to set the themes of like our OGS and any of our plenary sessions, and not asking for permission, but just actually doing it. And it's been well received. You're not going to please everyone, but reach out again, be diverse in who you're looking for. I think Beth had a good suggestion. You always have your industry experts that are part of your association. Reach out to them, right? But be intentional about what message you're trying to deliver to your audience, how you are trying to inspire them, right? To foster innovation, and just take some ownership of it. There's that ownership word again, right? Just take ownership of what you're doing.
And we keep on going back to the messages we said at the very beginning of this session. And it's just drilling home the message, which we all know. We just have to keep drilling the same message. Mariella, would you like to add anything to the question of obstacles?
Well, I think that in terms of obstacles, I think we need to recognize where we are right now and coming back. Timelines are very different than what they used to be. And when we want to encourage anything to happen, we have to start earlier than we did before.
Mm-hmm.
We have to recognize that supply chains are stressed, that labor is, the workforce is stressed, and it's harder to get people scheduled in. We have to really be adjust for the time period that we're living in and communicate regularly about our programs, our initiatives, our priorities, and make sure that we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, sustainability at every opportunity that we can with our supply chain, and that they're doing that with their supply chain. We have to be a little bit more flexible and a little bit more open to other ways of achieving the same goal, but always focused on that goal together. This is a time for us to work with our partners to talk about shared objectives, shared risks, and shared rewards. And this is how we will move forward together as an industry.
And I couldn't have wrapped it up better. Thank you so much, Mariella, for driving that all back home. And thank you all for listening. Thank you, panelists, for joining me. Before I wrap up totally and say goodbye, we are on a Hello America's What's Cooking show. So anything you want to share in terms of favorite foods, favorite restaurants, favorite recipes?
I can share that I am like obsessed with nachos right now. I don't know why. It's been like since the Super Bowl, and I cannot stop eating nachos. So that's my little guilty secret right now.
Well, I like nachos, but I'm really obsessed right now with Chick-fil-A. So I wasn't on the Chick-fil-A bandwagon earlier on, but now Chick-fil-A Cobb salad, I can eat that every day. A little healthy, a little unhealthy with the fried chicken. So
we have to indulge in those little unhealthy elements every now and then. Mariella, anything you would like?
Okay, so this is on the nacho tip here. We make a lot of mashed potatoes in our home, but what I've learned is you keep the peels and you toast them and use those as the chips for your nachos, and it's a great way to reduce food waste, and they're absolutely delicious.
Love that. Potachos. Love it. Love it.
Thank you so much. Oh my God, we are being very, very sustainable in reducing food waste. Excellent. Thank you so much for this tip. Thank you again for coming on the show. I'm hoping this is just a teaser for many things to come from the ASC M&E Council and from the EIC and from ECA, and that jointly we will be driving this initiative forward. For anybody in the audience who would like to come on the show again, please feel free to email me at xenia.p@icaworld.org. And I only have time to announce my guest for next week, which will be Stephanie Seguin, and she will talk on the 14th of April about the ECA North America Summit, which will take place in Ottawa, and give us a little bit of a taste of what's in store for us. Thank you very much. And we made everybody hungry in the audience. It's time for lunch, and wishing you all a great GMID and World Health Day.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.